A woman walks into a vet's office with the most extraordinary animal anyone has ever seen. A horse with a shimmering purple coat. The vet is stunned, examining it with disbelief, and what he discovers leaves him speechless. This isn't just a rare horse. It's the key to unraveling a mystery far beyond anything she could have imagined. Who does this horse belong to? What makes it so unique? And why are dangerous secrets tied to its existence? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the empty country road as Olivia Peterson drove home from visiting her friend Sarah. Golden light filtered through the trees, creating a peaceful scene that made her smile. She hummed along to the soft music playing on her car radio, enjoying the solitude of the rural route. Something caught her eye in the distance, a dark shape beneath an old oak tree. At first, she thought it might be a discarded tarp, or maybe just tricks of light and shadow playing among the branches. But as her car drew closer, her heart skipped a beat. "That can't be," she whispered, slowing down. There, standing motionless under the tree, was a horse. But not just any horse. This one was purple, a rich, ethereal purple that seemed to shimmer even in the fading daylight. Olivia blinked hard, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her. But the purple horse remained. She carefully pulled onto the gravel shoulder, her tires crunching as she parked. The horse didn't move, its head hanging low, sides heaving with each labored breath. Years of experience with horses told her something was very wrong. "Easy there," Olivia called softly as she stepped out of her car. The horse's ears twitched at her voice, but otherwise remained still. As she approached, she could see it trembling, its unusual coat damp with sweat despite the cool evening air. Moving slowly, she continued to speak in gentle, soothing tones. "It's okay, sweet one. I won't hurt you." The horse lifted its head slightly, revealing deep, intelligent eyes filled with exhaustion and what looked like resignation. Olivia's heart ached as she got close enough to see the horse's condition. Its hooves were cracked and worn, suggesting it had traveled a long way. Thorny burrs were tangled throughout its flowing mane, and dried mud caked its legs. Despite its obvious distress, the horse allowed her to move closer, watching her with those haunting eyes. "You poor thing," she murmured, carefully reaching out to touch its neck. The horse flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. Its purple coat felt silky beneath her fingers, and up close, the color was even more striking, unlike anything she'd ever seen before. The sun was sinking fast, and the temperature was dropping. Olivia knew she couldn't leave this mysterious creature out here alone. She hurried back to her car and retrieved the emergency blanket she kept in her trunk. "Let's get you warmed up," she said, returning to the horse. With careful movements, she draped the blanket around its neck and shoulders. The horse released a soft snort, some of the tension leaving its body as it leaned slightly toward her. "That's it," she encouraged, stroking its neck through the blanket. "We'll figure this out together." She glanced at her car, then back down the empty road, her mind racing as she tried to work out how to transport such a large animal back to her barn. Olivia pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed her brother's number. The purple horse remained still beside her, its breath creating small clouds in the cooling evening air. "Matt, I need your help," she said when he answered. "I found a horse on Old Mill Road. It's not exactly normal." "What do you mean, not normal?" Matt's voice crackled through the speaker. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Can you bring your trailer? This poor thing needs shelter for the night." There was a pause on the other end. "Is it injured?" "No, but it's exhausted and—" Olivia glanced at the horse's shimmering coat. Just trust me, okay? Matt sighed. Give me 20 minutes. While waiting, Olivia stayed close to the horse, speaking softly and running her hand along its neck. The purple coat sparkled with an almost metallic sheen in the last rays of sunlight. She searched for any identifying marks, a brand, a tattoo, even a microchip bump, but found nothing. "Where did you come from?" she wondered aloud. The horse's only response was to lean slightly into her touch, as if drawing comfort from her presence. Headlights appeared in the distance, and soon Matt's pickup truck pulled up with the horse trailer in tow. He stepped out, then froze mid-stride, his mouth dropping open. That's Purple," he stammered, staring at the horse. "I told you it wasn't normal." Matt shook his head slowly. "That's the strangest thing I've ever seen. Are you sure this is a good idea, Liv?" "We can't leave it here." Olivia grabbed a bucket from her car and filled it with water from a bottle. "Help me get it into the trailer." The horse balked at first, planting its hooves firmly when they tried to lead it forward. Olivia held the water bucket just inside the trailer's entrance, speaking encouragingly. "Come on, sweetie, just a few steps." After several tense minutes, the horse finally walked into the trailer, drawn by both thirst and Olivia's gentle persistence. Matt secured the door while Olivia stroked the horse's nose through the window. They drove slowly back to Olivia's farm, taking care over every bump and turn. The horse stayed quiet during the short journey, though Olivia could hear occasional shuffling from the trailer. At the barn, Olivia quickly prepared a stall, spreading fresh hay while Matt parked the trailer near the entrance. The horse seemed more willing to move now, following Olivia into the stall without resistance. She filled the water trough and added a scoop of grain to a bucket. "You're really keeping it?" Matt asked, watching from the stall door. "Just until we figure out where it belongs." Matt shook his head again. "This is crazy, Liv. A purple horse? Nobody's going to believe this." The horse lowered itself carefully onto the hay, its sides heaving with exhaustion. Olivia knelt beside it, adjusting the blanket. "We'll figure this out together," she whispered, while Matt headed home, still muttering in disbelief. The early morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Olivia made her way to the barn. Her boots crunched on the gravel path as she approached, her mind still trying to process the events of the previous evening. She pushed open the heavy wooden door, and there stood the purple horse, exactly where she'd left it. The horse's head lifted at her entrance, its large eyes following her movement. Even in the dim light filtering through the barn windows, its coat sparkled with an otherworldly shimmer. The animal's movements were slow and careful, suggesting it was still tired from its ordeal. "Good morning," Olivia said softly, approaching the stall. "How are you feeling today?" She prepared fresh hay and grain, watching as the horse began to eat with measured bites. While it ate, she filled a bucket with warm water and gathered her grooming supplies. The horse didn't flinch when she entered the stall, instead continuing to eat while keeping one eye on her. Taking her time, Olivia worked through the tangles in its mane, carefully removing burrs and debris. The horse stood perfectly still, occasionally letting out content sighs as she worked. She checked its legs and hooves, running her hands gently over its body to check for any injuries, but found none. The sound of car doors closing outside made both Olivia and the horse look up. Moments later, her parents and sister walked into the barn, their faces a mix of disbelief and wonder. "Matt wasn't exaggerating," her sister Sarah whispered, stepping closer to the stall. "It really is purple." Their father circled the stall slowly, his forehead creased with concern. "Where do you think it came from, Liv? This isn't natural." "I don't know," Olivia admitted, continuing to brush the horse's coat. "But it needed help, and I couldn't just leave it there." her mother reached out tentatively to touch the horse's nose. Its eyes. They seemed so intelligent, almost human-like. They spent the next hour examining the horse and discussing theories about its origin, but none seemed plausible. Eventually, they left Olivia alone with the mysterious animal, heading back to their daily routines. That afternoon, Olivia sat on a hay bale outside the stall, phone in hand. After a moment's hesitation, she dialed Dr. Adams' number. "Valley View Veterinary Clinic," came the familiar voice. "Dr. Adams, it's Olivia Peterson. I need your help with, well, it's unusual." She paused, trying to find the right words. "I found a horse yesterday, and there's something different about it. I was hoping you could come take a look." "Different how?" Dr. Adams asked. Olivia took a deep breath. "It's purple. Actually purple. I know how that sounds, but—" There was a long pause before Dr. Adams spoke again. "I can come by tomorrow morning, first thing." "Thank you," Olivia said, relief evident in her voice. She spent the evening in the barn, sitting near the stall while the horse dozed. Something about its presence felt right, despite all the questions surrounding it. The horse seemed to sense her thoughts, lifting its head occasionally to gaze at her with those striking, intelligent eyes. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through scattered clouds as Olivia guided the purple horse toward the borrowed trailer. She'd spent an hour preparing it, lining the floor with thick fresh straw and securing lead ropes carefully inside at strategic points. The horse balked slightly at the trailer's entrance, its polished hooves scraping against the metal ramp as its ears flicked back with uncertainty. "It's okay," Olivia soothed, stroking its warm neck with gentle, rhythmic motions. "Just a short ride, I promise. We'll be there before you know it." During the 20-minute drive to Dr. Adams' clinic, the horse shifted restlessly in the trailer, making the whole vehicle sway slightly. Olivia kept talking through the small window connecting the cab to the trailer, her voice steady and reassuring, and gradually the nervous movements settled into occasional shuffles. Her own stomach churned with anxiety as she pulled into the clinic's gravel parking lot, the stones crunching beneath the truck's tires. Dr. Adams and his assistant Jenny were waiting outside in their white coats, clipboards in hand. Their eyes widened dramatically as Olivia carefully backed the trailer to the examination area, the reverse lights casting a pale glow in the morning shadows. When she led the horse down the ramp, Jenny gasped audibly, her clipboard dropping to her side, and Dr. Adams took an involuntary step backward, his professional composure momentarily forgotten. "Good Lord," he whispered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with trembling fingers. Inside the brightly lit examination room, Dr. Adams worked methodically, despite his obvious amazement, his years of experience showing through. He checked the horse's temperature with practiced ease, listened intently to its heart and lungs through his stethoscope, and examined its teeth with careful, precise movements. The horse remained surprisingly cooperative throughout the examination, turning its head when needed and lifting its hooves at the gentlest touch, displaying an unusual level of patience. Dr. Adams ran his weathered hands along the horse's flank, bending close to examine the purple coat under the harsh fluorescent lights. His forehead creased with deepening confusion as he made his observations. He took several samples of the hair, carefully placing them in sealed containers, and scrutinized them under a bright examination light. "This isn't paint or dye," he murmured, shaking his head in disbelief as he rubbed a strand between his fingers. "The color goes right down to the root. I've never seen anything like it." Jenny, who had been diligently recording measurements in her notebook, paused her writing and looked up. "Doctor, have you noticed how it watches us? It's like it understands everything we're doing. Those eyes seem almost human." Dr. Adams nodded slowly, preparing a syringe for blood samples with methodical precision. The horse didn't flinch as he drew the blood from its neck, its intelligent eyes following his movements with an almost human-like awareness that sent a shiver down his spine. After collecting several vials of deep crimson blood, Dr. Adams turned to Olivia, removing his latex gloves with a snap. His usual confident demeanor had given way to something more uncertain, more troubled. "This horse isn't normal," he said, his voice serious and low. "I've never seen anything like this before in 30 years of practice. I'll need a few days to analyze the tests, but this may be something extraordinary, something unprecedented." Olivia nodded, her heart beating faster at his words as she absently stroked the horse's neck. She led the creature back to the trailer, her mind swimming with questions about what the test results might reveal and what they could mean for her mysterious purple companion. The following morning, Olivia walked into the barn carrying a bucket of fresh feed. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, casting warm patches on the hay-strewn floor. Violet's head poked over the stall door, her ears perking forward at the sound of approaching footsteps. "Good morning, beautiful," Olivia said softly, pouring the feed into Violet's trough. The name had come naturally. It seemed to fit the horse's unique coloring perfectly. While Violet munched contentedly on her breakfast, Olivia gathered her grooming supplies. The routine had already become familiar to them both. She started with Violet's face, using a soft brush to sweep away any dirt, then worked her way down the neck with long, gentle strokes. As she brushed near the base of Violet's neck, something caught her eye. Olivia paused, frowning. There, partially hidden beneath the purple fur, was an unusual marking. She parted the hair carefully with her fingers, revealing what appeared to be a brand or tattoo-like symbol. "What's this?" she murmured, leaning closer. The mark wasn't a typical ranch brand or identification number. Instead, it was an intricate geometric design, almost corporate-looking in its precision. The lines formed what appeared to be a stylized logo, though parts of it were difficult to make out under the coat. Olivia pulled out her phone and snapped several photos of the marking from different angles, making sure to capture every detail she could see. Her hands trembled slightly as she examined the pictures. This was the first real clue to Violet's mysterious past. She spent the next hour carefully checking every inch of Violet's body for additional marks or clues, but found nothing else unusual. The horse stood patiently throughout the examination, occasionally turning to nuzzle Olivia's shoulder as if sensing her concern. That evening, Olivia sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, the steam from her forgotten cup of tea curling into the air. She had been searching for hours, trying every combination of keywords she could think of to find information about the symbol. Just as her eyes were starting to blur from staring at the screen, she found something. It was buried in an old forum thread, a post describing a similar logo in connection with controversial animal research. Olivia's finger hovered over the touchpad, her heart pounding as she read the brief mention. A sudden chill crept down her spine. She closed the laptop with a sharp click, pushing it away from her. The quiet of the house felt heavy with the weight of this new information. Tomorrow, she would dig deeper. But for now, the discovery left her with more questions than answers. The morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Olivia opened her eyes, her mind already racing with thoughts of yesterday's discovery. After feeding the chickens and checking on her other animals, she settled into her favorite armchair with her laptop and a steaming mug of coffee. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she pulled up the forum post from the previous night. This time, she read it more carefully, focusing on every detail. There, in a thread about mysterious animal sightings, was a mention of Genexa Corp., a biotechnology company that supposedly conducted secretive animal experiments. Olivia's coffee grew cold as she followed one link after another. News articles, though sparse, painted a disturbing picture. Several reports described unusual animals appearing near Genexa Corp facilities, creatures with strange markings, odd behaviors, and unexplainable physical traits. Most intriguing were the accounts of these animals vanishing without a trace. Her breath caught when she found an article with a blurry photograph. The image showed what appeared to be a dog, its fur emitting an eerie glow in the dark. On its neck was a marking similar to the one she'd found on Violet. The article was dated just 6 months ago. "This can't be a coincidence," Olivia muttered, her hands shaking slightly as she clicked through more pages. She carefully printed everything she found: forum posts, news articles, and the grainy photo. Each page went into a fresh manila folder, which she labeled with today's date. The weight of the information felt heavy in her hands. That evening, Matt stopped by after work. They sat at her kitchen table while she spread out the contents of the folder. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the photo of the glowing dog. "The marking on its neck. It's almost identical to Violet's." Matt leaned forward, his forehead creased with concern. "Olivia, this sounds dangerous. If this company is doing what these articles suggest, they're not going to want anyone asking questions." "I know," she replied, gathering the papers back into the folder. "But I can't just ignore this. Violet came to me for a reason." Later that night, Olivia stood in the quiet barn, running her hand along Violet's neck. The horse's purple coat shimmered faintly in the dim light, a reminder of her extraordinary nature. "We'll figure this out together," she whispered, pressing her forehead against Violet's warm neck. The horse nickered softly in response, as if understanding the promise in her words. The next morning, Olivia sat at her kitchen table, staring at Dr. Adams' phone number. Her heart pounded as she dialed, knowing this call could change everything. The morning sunlight streaming through her window did little to calm her nerves as she listened to the ringtone. "Dr. Adams? It's Olivia Peterson. About Violet. I found something concerning." The vet listened intently as Olivia described the markings she'd discovered and her research into Genexa Corp. His usual calm demeanor gave way to worried silence. She could hear him shuffling papers in the background, probably already thinking about Violet's case files. "This is troubling," he said finally. "I can run more specialized tests on the blood samples we took. Look for genetic modifications, unusual markers, anything that might tell us more about what they did to her. Give me a few days to contact some colleagues who specialize in genetic testing." After hanging up, Olivia called Jenny Martinez, her high school friend who now worked as a local police officer. They met for coffee at the small diner downtown, where the smell of fresh baked pies and brewing coffee filled the air. "Genexa Corp?" Jenny frowned, stirring her coffee. Her police badge caught the fluorescent light as she shifted in the vinyl booth. "That name's come up a few times at the station. We've had reports of strange animal sightings and disappearances near their supposed facility out on Route 16. Nothing concrete enough for an investigation, but..." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Listen, Olivia, be careful. These people have serious connections. They don't like anyone poking around their business." Olivia nodded, her stomach tight with anxiety. After leaving the diner, she drove straight to the town library, a small brick building that held decades of local history in its archives. The familiar musty smell of old books and paper greeted her as she stepped inside. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Thompson, helped her locate boxes of old newspapers. Olivia's fingers grew dusty as she carefully sorted through yellowed pages, searching for any mention of Genexa Corp. The quiet ticking of the wall clock marked time as she dug deeper into the past. 2 hours into her search, she found it, a front-page article from 5 years ago. Local protests target biotech companies' animal testing. The black-and-white photo showed protesters holding signs outside a forbidding facility. High fences topped with razor wire surrounded a concrete building that looked more like a prison than a research center. The image was grainy, but the sense of foreboding it conveyed was crystal clear. Olivia's hands trembled as she read about accusations of genetic experimentation and unethical animal testing. Former employees had reported strange noises at night and unexplained disappearances of test subjects. The company had denied everything, and eventually the protests had died down. But the article hinted at cover-ups and suspicious accidents. She made copies of the article, her mind racing. The facility in the photo matched Jenny's description of the building on Route 16. Looking at the image again, Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. The stark concrete walls and security measures seemed excessive for a simple research facility. What exactly had they done to Violet within those walls? And more importantly, what were they still doing there now? The clock on Olivia's mantel ticked softly as she spread her research materials across the coffee table. News clippings, printouts, and hastily scribbled notes covered the wooden surface. Her eyes burned from hours of reading, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she felt so close to understanding Violet's mysterious origins. A sudden flash of light swept across her living room wall. Olivia froze, her hand hovering over a newspaper article. Through the gap in her curtains, she saw headlights illuminate her front yard. The engine's low rumble carried through the quiet night as a dark sedan pulled into her driveway. Minutes ticked by. The car just sat there, its engine idling. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest as she crept toward the window. Carefully pulling back the curtain, she tried to make out the driver, but the darkness and distance made it impossible. After what felt like forever, the car backed out and drove away, its taillights disappearing into the night. The next morning, Olivia walked down her gravel driveway, coffee cup in hand. Fresh tire tracks marked the spot where the mysterious car had parked. She took photos with her phone, then called Matt. "Someone was watching the house last night," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "Could be someone checking out Violet," Matt suggested. "If she really came from that company." "Don't be paranoid," Olivia said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. After hanging up, she drove to the hardware store and bought a bright motion sensor light. She spent the afternoon installing it near the barn's entrance, testing it until she was satisfied with its coverage. That evening, she double-checked every lock on Violet's stall, giving the horse an extra pat before heading back to the house. As darkness fell, the familiar sound of tires on gravel made Olivia's stomach clench. She rushed to the window. The same car sat parked further down the road, just within sight of her property. Anger suddenly replaced her fear. Whoever was watching her needed to explain themselves. Olivia marched outside, her boots crunching on the gravel. As she approached the car, a man stepped out, tall, wearing dark clothes that seemed too formal for a casual drive. "Can I help you?" Olivia called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Sorry to bother you," the man said smoothly. "I seem to be lost. Looking for Route 16. "Route 16 is 10 miles in the opposite direction," Olivia replied, studying his face in the dim light. "Strange place to get lost." The man mumbled something about his GPS being broken. Before Olivia could ask more questions, he was back in his car, engine starting. The sedan peeled away, leaving Olivia standing in the darkness, more certain than ever that Violet's presence had caught unwanted attention. The morning sun cast long shadows across the barn as Olivia filled Violet's water trough, the gentle splashing echoing in the quiet space. Her hands shook slightly, still unsettled from the previous night's encounter, causing tiny ripples in the water's surface. The purple horse watched her with those intelligent eyes, sensing her unease. Her ears pricked forward with an almost human-like awareness. Olivia's phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump and nearly drop the water bucket. Dr. Adams' name flashed on the screen, his familiar profile picture doing little to calm her nerves. Olivia, his voice was tight with concern, lacking its usual warmth. I've got Violet's test results back. You might want to sit down for this. She leaned against the barn wall, her heart racing beneath her worn flannel shirt. What did you find? I've never seen anything like it, Dr. Adams said, the wonder evident in his voice. The DNA analysis shows extensive manipulation. There are markers we typically see in domestic horses, but he paused as if gathering his thoughts, papers rustling in the background. There are other genetic sequences that don't match any known horse breeds. Some don't even seem to come from equine species at all. Olivia watched Violet calmly munching her hay, the sweet scent of fresh timothy filling the air. What does that mean exactly? Her cellular structure shows remarkable resilience. It might explain her unusual coloring and that calm temperament you mentioned. The lab ran the test twice to be sure. Dr. Adams cleared his throat, his discomfort apparent even through the phone. Olivia, this horse wasn't bred. She was engineered. Someone deliberately altered her genetic makeup in ways I can't even begin to understand. The implications made Olivia's head spin, her free hand gripping the rough wooden wall for support. So she really could be connected to Genexa Corp? Given what you've found about their experiments, it seems likely. This isn't natural, Olivia. Someone created her in a lab. After thanking Dr. Adams, Olivia called Matt immediately. She explained everything while pacing the barn aisle, her boots leaving scuff marks in the dusty concrete floor. We need to keep this quiet, Matt said firmly, his protective instincts kicking in. If these people are willing to experiment on animals like this, who knows what they do to protect their secrets? I know, Olivia agreed, running a nervous hand through her hair. No more social media posts about her, and I'll tell the family to keep it to themselves, too. That evening, Olivia double-checked every lock on the barn, testing each one twice. The metal clasp felt cold against her fingers in the growing darkness. Violet nickered softly as she approached the stall, her purple coat gleaming like silk in the dim light. Don't worry, girl, Olivia whispered, reaching out to stroke the horse's shimmering purple coat. The familiar warmth beneath her palm brought tears to her eyes. No matter what, I won't let anything happen to you. Her words were both a promise and a prayer in the gathering dusk. The morning light filtered through Olivia's home office window as she hunched over her laptop, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, searching through news archives from the past 5 years. Each new article made her stomach tighten with worry. The pattern was impossible to ignore. In towns surrounding Genexa Corp's facility, farmers reported animals vanishing without explanation. Some disappeared from locked barns, others from fenced pastures. The incidents spiked during periods when protesters gathered outside the company's gates, demanding investigations into their research practices. Olivia opened another tab, scrolling through local news reports. A photo showed protesters holding signs. Stop animal testing and what are they hiding? The article mentioned concerned citizens gathering after rumors of strange animal sightings near the facility, creatures that seemed somehow different from normal wildlife. Her hands trembled as she discovered an old WordPress blog dated 18 months ago. The author identified themselves only as former GX employee. The post detailed disturbing accounts of genetic experiments aimed at creating designer pets for wealthy clients. They described animals with enhanced abilities, altered appearances, and regenerative properties. Test subjects were valuable assets, the blog post read. When specimens escaped, recovery teams would track them down within days. No expense was spared in retrieving company property. Olivia's throat went dry as she read about the recapture methods. Teams working at night, unmarked vehicles, careful coordination to avoid public attention. The blog had been taken down shortly after posting, but someone had preserved screenshots. With shaking hands, Olivia gathered the printed articles, screenshots, and news clippings. She arranged them chronologically in a manila folder, each piece telling part of a darker story. The evidence painted a clear picture of a powerful corporation willing to go to extreme lengths to protect its secrets. Standing at her window, Olivia stared at the barn, where Violet rested safely in her stall. The familiar structure suddenly seemed fragile against the threats she'd uncovered. Her fingers tightened on the folder as anger and determination rose in her chest. "They're not getting her back," she whispered, her voice firm despite her fear. The afternoon sun streamed through the barn windows as Olivia brushed Violet's gleaming purple coat. Her mind was heavy with worry about the growing mystery surrounding her unusual companion. "I just don't know what to do," she said, working out a tangle in Violet's mane. "If they come looking for you—" She paused as Violet turned her head, fixing those intelligent eyes on her. The horse nickered softly and pressed her nose against Olivia's shoulder, as if trying to comfort her. "It's like you understand every word," Olivia marveled, patting Violet's neck. Later, during feeding time, something extraordinary happened. As Olivia approached with a bucket of grain, she stopped short, watching in amazement as Violet's nose carefully worked the metal latch of her stall. With a precise movement, the horse lifted the mechanism and pushed the door open. "That's impossible," Olivia whispered, the feed bucket nearly slipping from her hands. She'd never seen any horse manage something requiring such fine motor control. The real shock came an hour later. Olivia had climbed an old wooden ladder to fix a loose support beam near the hayloft. She stretched upward, reaching for the beam with her tools, when suddenly the ladder shifted beneath her. Her stomach lurched as she felt herself falling backward. Instead of hitting the hard barn floor, Olivia landed on something soft. Violet had somehow positioned herself perfectly, catching Olivia across her broad back. The horse had moved faster than seemed possible, anticipating exactly where Olivia would fall. Shaken but unharmed, Olivia slid off Violet's back and sat on a hay bale, her heart still racing. There was no question about it. Violet's actions had been deliberate. The horse had known Olivia was in danger and had acted to protect her. "You're more than just a horse, aren't you?" Olivia said softly, reaching out to stroke Violet's shimmering mane. The horse lowered her head, pressing her forehead against Olivia's chest in an almost human gesture of affection. Olivia wrapped her arms around Violet's neck, overwhelmed by the depth of connection she felt with this extraordinary creature. Violet's gentle nuzzling conveyed more than simple animal affection. There was an unmistakable intelligence in her actions, a consciousness that went beyond normal horse behavior. As Olivia sat there in the quiet barn, the weight of protecting this remarkable being felt even more crucial than before. Olivia pushed her cart down the market aisle, checking her shopping list for horse feed and supplies. The store was quiet for a Thursday afternoon, with just a few other customers browsing the shelves. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. She reached for a bag of carrots, thinking how much Violet seemed to enjoy them as treats. The horse's delighted whinnies whenever she saw the orange vegetables always brought a smile to Olivia's face. "Excuse me," a deep voice said behind her. Olivia turned to find a tall man in a dark jacket watching her. His face was clean-shaven and unremarkable, but something about his steady gaze made her stomach tighten. He stood perfectly still, like a statue in expensive clothing. "I couldn't help but notice you looking at horse supplies," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Do you own a horse?" Olivia's hand gripped the shopping cart handle tighter, her knuckles turning white. "No," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just picking up some things for a friend." The man took a step closer, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. The sound echoed in the quiet aisle. Are you sure about that? There have been some interesting reports in this area lately. I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia said, starting to push her cart away. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He moved to block her path, still maintaining that eerily calm demeanor. A fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across his face. If you happen to come across something unusual, you'd be wise to keep quiet. His tone dropped lower, an edge of menace creeping in. Some things are better left alone. Before Olivia could respond, the man turned and walked away, disappearing between the aisles. His footsteps faded into silence. She stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. The store suddenly felt too exposed, too vulnerable. Abandoning her half-filled cart, she hurried out to her truck, the automatic doors whooshing behind her. The drive home felt endless. Olivia's hands shook on the steering wheel as she took the familiar country roads. Trees and fields blurred past her window, but she barely noticed them. As soon as she pulled into her driveway, gravel crunching under the tires, she ran straight to the barn, not even bothering to close her truck door. "Violet?" she called out, rushing inside. Her voice cracked with worry. The barn was quiet and peaceful, filled with the familiar scents of hay and leather. Violet stood in her stall, ears perked forward at Olivia's entrance. The horse nickered softly, stretching her purple-tinged neck over the stall door. Olivia pressed her forehead against Violet's warm neck, relief flooding through her. The gentle rise and fall of the horse's breathing helped calm her racing thoughts. But as her panic subsided, the man's warning echoed in her mind. This wasn't just about protecting a mysterious horse anymore. There were people out there who meant business, and they knew where to find her. The peaceful afternoon had transformed into something darker, and Olivia knew their quiet life would never be the same. The night pressed heavy and dark against Olivia's windows as she tossed and turned in bed. Sleep refused to come, her mind racing with thoughts of the threatening man from the market. Every sound made her jump: the creaking of the old farmhouse, the whisper of wind through trees, the distant hooting of an owl. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. Her dog Max started barking frantically, his deep growls echoing through the house. Olivia's heart leaped into her throat as she grabbed the flashlight from her bedside table. Her hands trembled as she pulled on her boots. "Come on, Max," she whispered, and the German Shepherd followed close at her heels as she crept down the stairs. The beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness as she made her way toward the barn. Max's barking grew more intense, his hackles raised. The night air felt electric with tension. As she drew closer, her light caught something that made her blood run cold. The barn doors stood slightly open, swaying gently in the breeze. Olivia's hand shook as she examined the lock. Deep scratches marred the metal, clear signs that someone had tried to break in. Her heart pounding, she pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. Violet was pacing in her stall, her hooves clicking nervously against the floor. The horse's purple coat seemed to shimmer with agitation in the beam of the flashlight. "It's okay, girl," Olivia soothed, reaching out to stroke Violet's neck. The horse pressed against her hand, trembling slightly. As Max sniffed around the barn, Olivia noticed footprints in the dirt floor, unfamiliar boot prints that didn't match her own or her family's shoes. Near a stack of hay bales, something caught her eye. She moved closer and found a pair of black leather gloves and a heavy-duty flashlight, clearly dropped in haste. With shaking fingers, Olivia pulled out her phone and called the police. They arrived within 20 minutes, their patrol car's lights painting the barn in alternating red and blue. The officers photographed the scratched lock, the footprints, and the abandoned items, asking her detailed questions about what she'd heard and seen. "We'll increase patrols in your area," one officer assured her, jotting notes in his notebook. "But you might want to consider additional security measures." After the police left, Olivia didn't waste any time. She drove to the 24-hour hardware store in town and bought a complete set of motion-activated security cameras. Working through the early morning hours, she mounted them strategically around her property, covering the driveway, the barn entrance, and all possible approach routes. As she finished installing the last camera, she glanced at Violet's stall. The horse watched her with those intelligent eyes, and Olivia felt a surge of determination. She wouldn't let anyone harm this extraordinary creature who had come into her life. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dr. Patel's research facility as Olivia led Violet from the trailer. The wildlife geneticist stood in the doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of the purple horse. Dr. Adams had called ahead, but seeing Violet in person was clearly different from any description. "Remarkable," Dr. Patel breathed, approaching slowly. Her dark eyes studied Violet's coat with scientific precision. "The pigmentation is unlike anything I've ever seen." She reached out, and Violet lowered her head, allowing the geneticist to touch her mane. The examination room was larger than Dr. Adams' clinic, filled with sophisticated equipment. Violet remained surprisingly calm as Dr. Patel drew blood samples and conducted various tests. The horse seemed to understand the importance of staying still, only occasionally turning to look at Olivia for reassurance. "The cellular structure is fascinating," Dr. Patel explained, peering through a microscope. "See these markers here?" She gestured for Olivia to look. "They indicate enhanced regenerative properties. But what's truly extraordinary is the integration of genetic material from multiple species." Olivia watched as Dr. Patel pulled up complex charts on her computer screen. "This horse isn't just genetically modified," the scientist continued, her voice filled with wonder and concern. "It's a breakthrough in bioengineering. These combinations shouldn't be possible, and yet—" She gestured at Violet, who stood quietly in the corner. Dr. Patel's expression grew serious as she turned to face Olivia. "You need to understand something. Creating an animal like this would have required massive resources and cutting-edge technology. Whoever did this will want her back. They'll stop at nothing to reclaim her." The weight of those words settled heavily on Olivia's shoulders. Dr. Patel pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "I know a wildlife sanctuary that specializes in unique or endangered animals. They're discreet and well protected. Violet would be safe there." Olivia took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. The thought of sending Violet away made her heart ache. She looked at the horse, remembering how Violet had saved her from falling, how they'd formed such a deep connection in such a short time. On the drive home, Olivia's mind raced with possibilities. The sanctuary might be safer for Violet, but the bond they shared felt too precious to break. She glanced in the rearview mirror at the trailer behind her, knowing she needed time to figure out her next move while keeping Violet protected. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Olivia walked down her gravel driveway to check the mailbox, her boots crunching against the stones with each step. Among the usual bills and advertisements, she found a plain white envelope with no return address. Her stomach tightened as she pulled out a single typesheet of paper, the crisp edges catching the fading sunlight. "To whom it may concern," the letter began coldly. "The purple horse in your possession is property of a private research facility. Keeping this animal is illegal and constitutes theft of proprietary technology. Return the horse immediately or face severe legal consequences." The words seemed to leap off the page, each one feeling like a physical blow. Olivia's hands shook as she read the words again, her heart pounding against her ribs. The threat was clear, though carefully worded to avoid directly naming Genexa Corp. She hurried inside, double-checking that all her doors were locked, testing each handle twice just to be sure. When Matt arrived 20 minutes later, his truck kicking up dust in the driveway, she handed him the letter. His face darkened as he read it, jaw clenching visibly. "We should take this to the police," he said, running a hand through his hair. "This is harassment." "And tell them what?" Olivia paced her kitchen, her footsteps echoing against the tile floor. "That someone's threatening me over a purple horse? We don't have any proof connecting this to Genexa Corp. They'd think we're crazy." She stopped at her window, looking out toward the barn where Violet was safely tucked away, the mare's purple coat barely visible in the dim light. Matt sighed, knowing she had a point, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Then what's your plan?" Olivia pulled out her phone and snapped several photos of the letter from different angles, making sure each word was clearly visible. "I'm sending these to Dr. Patel. She seems to understand what we're dealing with here." Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she composed the message, asking for the geneticist's advice, her hands still trembling slightly. The response came faster than expected. Her phone rang less than an hour later, Dr. Patel's name flashing on the screen like a beacon of hope. "This letter confirms they know exactly where you are," Dr. Patel said without preamble, her voice tight with concern and professional urgency. "You need to act fast. Don't let them intimidate you into giving up Violet, but be prepared. They're making their move." Olivia stood at her living room window, gazing out at the barn where the security lights cast long shadows in the growing darkness, their beams cutting through the evening gloom. Her jaw set with determination as she absorbed Dr. Patel's words. "What should I do?" "Protect Violet," Dr. Patel replied firmly, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "Document everything. And whatever you do, don't let them intimidate you into backing down. We're not going to let them win this." The morning sun filtered through the barn windows as Olivia sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand. She'd saved the sanctuary's number in her contacts days ago, but hadn't found the courage to make the call until now. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stared at the screen, knowing this call could change everything. Taking a deep breath, she dialed. "Silver Pines Wildlife Sanctuary. This is Sarah speaking." A warm voice answered, the kind that immediately put people at ease. Olivia's words tumbled out as she explained Violet's situation, the mysterious appearance, the purple coat, the threatening letter, and Dr. Patel's findings. She could hear the scratch of a pen as the director took notes, the small sound somehow making everything feel more final and real. "I understand completely," Sarah said, her tone gentle but professional. "We've handled cases like this before. It's not easy, but it's the safest option for the animal. We know how difficult this decision must be for you." Olivia's grip tightened on the phone, her knuckles turning white. "You've dealt with situations like this?" "More than you'd think," Sarah replied with a hint of sadness in her voice. "Last year, we took in a fox with bioluminescent fur. Before that, there was a deer with remarkable healing abilities. Both were products of unauthorized experiments." She paused before continuing, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. "These animals need specialized care and protection. We have state-of-the-art security systems and staff trained to handle unique cases." Sarah described their facilities, the spacious enclosures, the on-site veterinary clinic, the round-the-clock surveillance. Her voice grew more animated as she spoke about their resources. "We even have legal teams ready to defend our rescued animals if necessary," she added with quiet determination. But as Sarah spoke about their success stories, Olivia felt her heart growing heavier with each word. She looked out her kitchen window at the barn where Violet stood in her paddock, her purple coat shimmering like twilight in the morning light. The sight made her chest ache with an almost physical pain. After ending the call, Olivia walked to the barn, her footsteps slow and heavy on the well-worn path. Violet nickered softly as she approached, stretching her neck over the stall door, her eyes warm and trusting. Olivia reached up to stroke her mane, feeling the silky strands slip through her fingers like purple silk. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice catching on each word. "But I need to do what's best for you." Tears welled up in her eyes as Violet gently nudged her shoulder, as if trying to comfort her. The gesture, so simple yet so understanding, broke something inside her. Olivia wrapped her arms around Violet's neck, burying her face in the horse's mane, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and horse. "I'll never let them take you away. But if it's what's best for you, I'll do what I have to." Violet's gentle breath warmed Olivia's cheek as more tears fell, the horse standing perfectly still, offering silent comfort to her distressed friend. In that moment, the bond between them felt stronger than ever, making the possibility of separation even more heart-wrenching. The morning sun cast long shadows across the road as Olivia headed into town, her grocery list tucked in her pocket. She glanced in her rearview mirror, noticing a black SUV several car lengths behind. Something about its presence made her uneasy, but she tried to shake off the feeling. At the first intersection, Olivia turned right toward the shopping district. The SUV followed. She made another turn, then another. Each time, the dark vehicle matched her movements, maintaining the same distance. Her heart began to beat faster as she gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Maybe I'm being paranoid," she muttered to herself, but her instincts told her otherwise. To test her theory, she veered off onto Old Mill Road, a winding stretch that led away from town. Nobody took this route unless they lived out that way, and she knew most of her neighbors' vehicles. The SUV suddenly accelerated, closing the gap between them. Olivia's pulse quickened as she watched it grow larger in her mirror. The vehicle was so close now she could see the tinted windows and chrome grille. Without warning, it swerved into the opposite lane, engine roaring as it pulled alongside her car. Olivia's hands trembled on the wheel as the SUV drifted toward her, forcing her toward the shoulder. Gravel crunched under her tires as she fought to keep control. Up ahead, she spotted Joe's Diner, its parking lot filled with the lunch crowd. Making a split-second decision, she yanked the wheel hard, cutting across traffic into the lot. The SUV slowed, hovering at the entrance. Olivia held her breath, watching as it finally pulled away, disappearing down the highway in a cloud of dust. Her legs felt weak as she stumbled out of her car and into the diner. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully, a stark contrast to her racing heart. She slid into a booth and pulled out her phone, dialing Matt with shaking fingers. "They followed me, Matt," she said when he answered, her voice quivering. "A black SUV. They tried to run me off the road." "Are you okay?" Matt's concern was evident. "You need to call the police right now. This isn't a game anymore." Olivia nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I will. I'm at Joe's Diner. I don't think they followed me in here." "Stay there," Matt insisted. "I'm calling the police, and then I'm coming to get you." After hanging up, Olivia spoke with the police, providing them with as many details as she could remember about the vehicle. The officer took her statement seriously, promising to increase patrols in her area and look into similar reports. The next morning, Olivia's phone rang just as she finished her morning coffee. Detective Roberts introduced himself, his voice carrying a note of urgency that made her sit up straighter. "We've been investigating Genexa Corp for months," he explained. "There's enough evidence now to justify a raid on one of their facilities. We believe this operation involves illegal animal experimentation." Olivia's hand tightened around her mug. "Have you found anything concrete?" "We're moving in today. I'll keep you informed of what we find," the detective assured her. Throughout the morning, Olivia tried to focus on her usual tasks, but her mind kept wandering to the raid. Around noon, she turned on the local news channel and gasped. There on the screen was aerial footage of police vehicles surrounding a large warehouse with the Genexa Corp logo. The news anchor's voice was steady as she reported, "Breaking news. Local authorities have raided a Genexa Corporation warehouse following months of investigation. Initial reports indicate authorities have discovered multiple cages containing exotic and genetically altered animals." The camera panned across officers leading people out in handcuffs, while others carried boxes of documents. The reporter continued, "Sources say the evidence points to an extensive operation involving unethical practices, including the creation of hybrid animals for profit." Olivia watched, transfixed, as images flashed across the screen showing glimpses of strange-looking creatures being carefully removed from the facility. Her phone rang again just as the sun was setting. It was Detective Roberts. "Ms. Peterson," he said, his voice grave, "we've confirmed what you suspected. We found records linking your horse to this facility. The DNA modifications they performed, well, she's more than just a horse." "What does this mean?" Olivia asked, her throat tight. "It means she's a key piece of evidence in our case against Genexa," the detective explained. "But I need to warn you, even with these arrests, there may be others who want to retrieve her. Stay alert. We'll increase patrols in your area, but you need to remain vigilant." Olivia thanked him and hung up, feeling both relieved and terrified. The truth about Violet was finally coming to light, but the danger wasn't over. She walked to her window and looked out at the barn, where her precious purple horse was safely tucked away for the night. The manila envelope arrived on a sunny Tuesday morning. Olivia's hands trembled as she opened it, her heart sinking as she read the formal legal document inside. Genexa Corp was suing her for unlawful possession of property, claiming Violet belonged to them as intellectual property. They demanded the horse's immediate return. She sat heavily at her kitchen table, the papers spread before her. The legal jargon swam before her eyes, but the message was clear. They weren't giving up without a fight. Later that afternoon, Olivia met with Sarah Chen, a lawyer specializing in animal rights cases who came highly recommended by Dr. Patel. They sat in Ms. Chen's office, surrounded by law books and case files. "I'll be honest with you," Ms. Chen said, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the summons. "Genexa Corp's argument, while morally bankrupt, carries some legal weight. They're claiming Violet as intellectual property due to their genetic modifications." Olivia leaned forward. "But she's a living creature, not some invention." "Exactly," Ms. Chen nodded. "That's our angle. We need to prove that Violet isn't property, but a sentient being deserving of protection under animal welfare laws. The genetic modifications actually work in our favor. They demonstrate her advanced intelligence and awareness." They spent the next hour outlining their strategy. Ms. Chen explained they would need testimony from experts like Dr. Patel and documentation of Violet's behavior showing her cognitive abilities and emotional bonds. Back home, Olivia began gathering support. She called the Wildlife Sanctuary Director, who immediately offered to testify about similar cases and the importance of protecting genetically modified animals from exploitation. Dr. Patel agreed to serve as an expert witness, ready to explain the ethical implications of treating sentient beings as property. Word spread through the small town quickly. Neighbors stopped by with offers to help, some sharing stories of their own encounters with Violet. The local feed store owner offered to start a donation fund for legal expenses. Even the town's newspaper editor wanted to run a story about Violet's case. That evening, Olivia stood in Violet's stall, wrapping her arms around the horse's strong neck. Violet's purple coat shimmed softly in the barn's dim light as she nuzzled Olivia's shoulder. "We'll get through this," Olivia whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to Violet's forehead. Together. The story of Violet and Olivia's legal battle spread like wildfire through local news channels. The Millbrook Chronicle ran a front-page article titled, "Purple Horse Golden Heart, Local Woman Fights Big Biotech." Within days, the quiet farming community transformed into a hub of activism. On Saturday morning, more than 200 people gathered in the town square. They carried handmade signs reading "Justice for Violet" and "Animals are not property." Children wore purple ribbons in their hair, and some had painted their faces with violet stripes in solidarity. "I've lived here 40 years, said Margaret Wilson, a retired school teacher holding a sign that read, "Stop Animal Experimentation." "We take care of our own, and that includes Violet." The crowd grew larger as people from neighboring towns arrived. They set up tables collecting donations for legal fees, and volunteers handed out purple armbands. Local businesses showed their support by displaying purple ribbons in their windows. Sarah Martinez, a journalist from the Regional Times, interviewed Olivia near the rally center. "What makes Violet special isn't just her unusual appearance," Olivia explained, her voice steady despite her emotions. "It's her intelligence, her personality, her ability to form deep connections. She's not an experiment. She's family." Dr. Patel stood before the crowd, her scientific credentials lending weight to her passionate speech. "I've studied genetic modification for 20 years, she declared, but Violet represents something unprecedented. She displays remarkable cognitive abilities and emotional awareness. Treating her as mere property ignores the fundamental rights of sentient beings." The doctor shared observations of Violet's behavior, how she problem-solved, showed empathy, and formed complex social bonds. "These aren't just trained responses," Dr. Patel emphasized. "They represent genuine intelligence and emotional capacity." As the afternoon sun began to set, the rally reached its peak. Hundreds of voices joined together, chanting, "Save Violet" and "Stand for Justice." Olivia stood on her farmhouse porch, overwhelmed by the sight before her. The entire town seemed to have turned out, their support forming a human sea of purple and determination. Mrs. Johnson from the bakery had organized a bake sale, with all proceeds going to the legal fund. The high school's art club created beautiful portraits of Violet, selling prints to raise money. Even Mr. Thompson, known as the town's grumpiest resident, stood quietly in the crowd wearing a purple bandana. Looking out at the gathering, Olivia felt tears well up in her eyes. The community's unity touched her deeply, transforming her private struggle into a shared mission for justice. These weren't just neighbors anymore. They were allies in the fight to protect Violet. In a small conference room at the local courthouse, Olivia sat with her lawyer, Mr. Bennett, while Dr. Patel spread out a series of genetic charts across the wooden table. The detective, Officer Martinez, leaned forward, his weathered face intent on the complex diagrams before them. "What we've discovered is remarkable," Dr. Patel said, pointing to highlighted sections of Violet's DNA sequence. "These markers here, they're specifically engineered for cellular regeneration. The implications for medical science are extraordinary." Mr. Bennett adjusted his glasses, studying the documents. "Can you explain this in simpler terms?" "Violet's genetic makeup contains sequences that could potentially revolutionize how we treat injuries and diseases," Dr. Patel explained. "Her cells have an enhanced ability to heal and regenerate. This could be groundbreaking for medical treatments." Officer Martinez picked up one of the reports. "So this is why Genexa Corp is fighting so hard to get her back?" "Exactly," Dr. Patel nodded, pulling out another chart. "But there's more. See this pattern here? The purple coat isn't just a random mutation. It's deliberately engineered, a visual marker to track their experimental subjects." The room fell silent as Dr. Patel continued her explanation. She showed them photographs of cellular structures, pointing out the unique properties that made Violet special. Based on documents recovered from the raid, we believe Violet was part of a larger experiment. The company likely abandoned her when they thought she didn't meet their specific requirements, or she may have been lost during transport. But she's far from a failed experiment, Dr. Patel added, her voice growing passionate. Her intelligence, her emotional capacity, her ability to form complex bonds. These traits weren't part of their original design. She developed them naturally. She's evolved beyond their expectations. Olivia listened intently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The scientific terminology was overwhelming, but the implications were clear. Violet was even more extraordinary than they'd imagined. What's remarkable, Dr. Patel continued, is that while they were focused on her physical traits, they completely overlooked her cognitive development. Her intelligence and emotional awareness make her far more valuable as a living being than she ever was as a laboratory specimen. Mr. Bennett shuffled through the papers, making notes. This strengthens our case considerably. They can't claim she's just property when she's demonstrated such advanced capabilities. Olivia stared at the images of Violet's DNA, her mind processing everything she'd learned. Her voice was quiet, but determined when she finally spoke. "They gave up on her," she said, looking around the room. "But I won't." The detective nodded approvingly, while Mr. Bennett gathered the documents into his briefcase. Dr. Patel's evidence had transformed their case from a simple property dispute into something much more significant, a fight for the rights of a unique and sentient being. The evening sun cast long shadows across the barn as Olivia leaned against Violet's stall, watching the purple horse contentedly munch on fresh hay. These quiet moments had become precious to her as the court date loomed closer. She reached out to stroke Violet's silky mane, remembering the day she'd found her trembling beneath that tree on the deserted road. "Look how far we've come," Olivia murmured, her fingers tracing the familiar patterns of Violet's unique coat. The horse lifted her head, dark eyes meeting Olivia's with that uncanny intelligence that still took her breath away. In the peaceful stillness of the barn, reality settled heavily on Olivia's shoulders. She'd been avoiding this moment, pushing away the thoughts that kept her awake at night. But now, watching Violet's gentle movements and thinking of the threats they still faced, she knew what she had to do. Her heart ached as she made the decision. The sanctuary would be the safest place for Violet if things went wrong. They had the resources, the security, and the experience to protect her. More importantly, they could give Violet the freedom she deserved. Acres of land to roam, other special animals to befriend, and experts who understood her unique needs. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes as she pressed her face against Violet's neck. "You deserve a life where you can just be yourself," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Where you don't have to hide or be afraid anymore." Violet seemed to sense her distress, turning to nuzzle Olivia's shoulder with surprising gentleness. The gesture only made the tears fall faster, but Olivia knew she was making the right choice. Sometimes love meant letting go. Later that afternoon, Matt and Dr. Patel joined Olivia at her kitchen table. They spread out maps and documents, carefully planning every detail of Violet's potential transfer to the sanctuary. Dr. Patel had already coordinated with the sanctuary staff, ensuring they were prepared for any scenario. "The sanctuary has a special transport vehicle ready," Dr. Patel explained, pointing to a detailed timeline. "They can move quickly if necessary." Matt squeezed his sister's hand as she wiped away fresh tears. "We're doing this to protect her," he reminded her gently. Olivia nodded, picking up her pen to sign the necessary paperwork. Her hand trembled slightly, but her signature was clear and decisive. Each document felt like another piece of her heart breaking, but she wouldn't let her personal feelings endanger Violet's safety. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse windows as Olivia sat beside her lawyer, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations and the rustle of papers. Dr. Patel sat nearby, her expression calm and professional as she reviewed her notes one last time. Genexa Corp's legal team filled the opposite side of the courtroom, their expensive suits and confident demeanors a stark contrast to Olivia's simple dress and nervous energy. The judge entered and everyone rose, the room falling silent. As the proceedings began, Dr. Patel took the stand. Her voice carried clearly through the courtroom as she explained Violet's unique genetic makeup and extraordinary intelligence. "This isn't just about modified DNA," she stated firmly. "Violet displays emotional awareness and decision-making abilities far beyond typical equine behavior. She forms bonds, shows empathy, and demonstrates remarkable problem-solving skills." The detective followed, presenting evidence from the raid on Genexa's facility. Photos of empty cages and detailed records of genetic experiments flashed across the courtroom screen. Several people gasped at the disturbing images. Genexa's lawyers tried to paint Olivia as a thief who had stolen valuable research property, but their arguments seemed hollow against the mounting evidence of the company's unethical practices. When they claimed Violet was simply an expensive investment, Olivia's lawyer presented statements from community members who had witnessed Violet's gentle nature and intelligent behavior. The judge listened intently, taking careful notes as each side presented their case. Outside the courthouse windows, supporters held signs reading, "Justice for Violet," and "Animals are not property." Their presence gave Olivia strength as she waded through the long hours of testimony. During the deliberation, Olivia sat quietly, remembering every moment with Violet, from finding her weak and afraid on that country road to watching her grow strong and confident under her care. Dr. Patel squeezed her shoulder supportively. When the judge finally returned, the courtroom fell silent. He cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice firm and clear. "After reviewing all evidence presented, this court finds that the animal, known as Violet, cannot be considered mere property. The genetic modifications, while created in a lab, have resulted in a unique sentient being deserving of protection under the law." The judge continued, ordering Genexa Corp to cease all similar experiments and shut down their facilities pending further investigation. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as cheers erupted throughout the courtroom. She hugged Dr. Patel tightly as supporters applauded and celebrated around them. Weeks after the court victory, Olivia stood in her barn, preparing Violet for her journey to the sanctuary. Though the court had officially recognized Violet as part of her family, Olivia knew the sanctuary would provide the specialized care and protection Violet needed. She brushed the horse's purple coat until it shimmered in the morning light, fighting back tears as she worked. The sanctuary sprawled across hundreds of acres, with rolling green pastures dotted with trees and gentle slopes. As Olivia led Violet from the trailer, the horse's ears perked up at the sight of other rescued animals grazing in the distance. The sanctuary director, Jessica, greeted them warmly and showed them to Violet's new enclosure, a spacious paddock connected to a clean, comfortable stable. "She'll have plenty of room to run here," Jessica explained, gesturing to the extensive grounds. "And our veterinary team is experienced with genetically modified animals. She'll be monitored closely." Violet stepped cautiously into her new space, nostrils flaring as she took in the unfamiliar scents. To Olivia's relief, the horse seemed curious rather than afraid, exploring the fresh hay and water trough with interest. Other horses nickered from nearby paddocks, and Violet's ears swiveled toward the sound. As days turned into weeks, Olivia became a regular fixture at the sanctuary. She visited 3 times a week, helping with chores and spending time with Violet. The horse thrived in her new environment, growing stronger and more confident. Her purple coat gleamed with health, and she often galloped playfully with her new companions in the adjacent paddocks. One sunny afternoon, Olivia leaned against the fence, watching Violet run free across the pasture. The horse's mane caught the light, shimming with that otherworldly purple hue that had first caught Olivia's attention on that fateful evening. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy mixed with grateful acceptance. Violet paused in her run, turning to look at Olivia with those intelligent eyes. She trotted over, pressing her soft muzzle against Olivia's hand in a familiar gesture of affection. The moment captured everything their journey had meant: trust, love, and the courage to do what was right, even when it hurt. "You're home now, Violet," Olivia whispered, stroking the horse's nose. "You're safe." If you enjoyed the story of Olivia and Violet, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.